My water broke on the cold marble floor of my sister's wedding. Moments earlier, she had shoved me knowing I was 37 weeks pregnant because I refused to move a heavy floral vase. Her perfect wedding photo meant more than my safety. As I struggled to get up drenched and trembling, my father grabbed a tripod and struck me across the head. Yes, he hit me. In front of 200 guests. While I was in labor, I remember the gasps, the silence, the sharp edge of the floor, and then the screaming. Not mine, but theirs. Panicked, ashamed, too late. My name is Natalie Bennett. I'm 31 years old, a mother, a wife, and a woman who was nearly broken by the very people who were supposed to love her. What happened that day didn't just bring my son into the world, it destroyed the illusion I had held onto my entire life. Have you ever reached your breaking point with your own family? Tell me your story in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe to hear how this nightmare turned into something powerful. Because the moment I was hit was the moment I finally woke up. I used to think family meant unconditional love, that no matter how messy things got, blood would hold you together. But some families are built on silence, on competition, on roles. You didn't ask to play. I was the forgotten one. In our home in Portland, there was a script. My mother, Helen, played the lead, flawless, calculating, always in control. My father, Frank, was the quiet presence with loud expectations, and my sister, Emily, the golden girl, perfect grades, perfect skin, perfect spotlight. Me, I was the placeholder in the background of their lives, the one who didn't shine enough. I remember being 10 and winning a spelling bee at school. I came home ribbon in hand, cheeks still flushed with pride. My mom barely glanced up from curling her eyelashes. That's cute, she said. Emily just got invited to sing at the spring recital. That was the pattern. Always second place in a race I didn't sign up for. I got used to shrinking. I got used to applause that wasn't meant for me. And when I finally started building something of my own, a small event planning business I built from the ground up, they barely noticed. When I met Steven, he asked me why I always said sorry before speaking. I didn't know how to answer. He was the first person who made space for me to exist fully, not in comparison to anyone else, just me. We built our life quietly without the fanfare. My parents loved. When we got married in a garden ceremony with 30 people, my parents didn't come. Said they had a cruise planned. Emily sent a text 2 days later. Hope it went well. That was it. And when I got pregnant after all the years of working, surviving, rebuilding, I thought maybe now, maybe a grandchild would soften the sharp edges. Maybe they'd ask how I was feeling. Maybe they'd finally see me, but when I told them, their response wasn't even cold, it was absent. My mom blinked and said, "With that business of yours, that's going to be hard." My dad didn't speak at all, so I lowered the bar again. I stopped hoping. I focused on Steven, on our future, on staying healthy and calm for our baby. And then 2 months before my due date, it arrived. A wedding invitation. Emily's, of course, gold foil, blush ribbon, calligraphy font. The kind of invite that cost more than my first car. Steven found it in the mail and slid it onto the counter without a word. I stared at it for a long time. I should have thrown it away, but part of me still wanted to believe the fantasy that if I walked in belly full of life, maybe they'd look up, maybe they'd see me this time. Steven touched my hand and said gently, "If you want to go, I'll be right there. But if you feel even a little hurt, we walk out." No explanations. That's the kind of love I never knew growing up. So I said yes. Not because I expected a warm welcome, but because I needed closure. I needed to know once and for all if there was anything left to salvage. The morning of the wedding, I stood in front of the mirror adjusting the navy blue dress that barely zipped over my 8-month belly. It was the only one that felt remotely breathable. My ankles were swollen, my back ached constantly, and my feet had long given up on anything other than flats. Still, I brushed my hair, put on light makeup, and wore the sapphire earrings Steven gave me on our first anniversary. I looked tired, but I looked strong. And I wanted them to see that Steven helped me into the car and kept one hand on my leg the entire drive. Every few minutes, he'd glance at me silently. Checking if I still wanted to go through with this, I nodded each time. But deep down, something twisted in my gut, something heavier than just a full-term pregnancy. The venue was a place called the Evermont Estate, a mansion-turned-event hall tucked away in the wealthier edge of town. The kind of place my family adored. Dramatic, expensive, curated down to the last imported rose. The moment we pulled into the lot, I knew luxury cars lined the entrance, women in gowns that shimmered in the sunlight, floated up marble steps, and no one looked at me, no nods, no smiles. I was invisible again. Inside it was a sea of white and gold, crystal chandeliers, tall candle towers, endless flowers. I clutched Stephen's hand tighter. Then came the welcome, not from my parents, not even from Emily, but from one of her assistants, a girl who looked barely 20. She handed us a small envelope with a smile so fake it hurt. "Table 34, she said, "right this way." Stephen opened it. I saw his jaw tighten. "Reserved for overflow." Seating, the card read, "Overflow." Like luggage, like something that didn't belong. Our table was tucked into a dim hallway near the kitchen. The linens were wrinkled, the utensils mismatched. We couldn't even see the main stage where the ceremony would take place. Stephen didn't say anything. He just pulled out my chair and kissed the top of my head. I whispered, "It's okay, we expected this." He sat beside me, trying to hide how furious he was. The ballroom buzzed with conversation. Familiar faces walked by, my parents' friends, old neighbors, even former teachers of Emily and me. But none of them stopped. None acknowledged me. And then I saw her. Emily stood by the archway, surrounded by photographers. She wore a blush silk gown that looked like something out of a dream, her hair in effortless curls, lips painted in her signature soft pink. Everything about her glowed, staged, perfect, envied. I wasn't jealous. I was exhausted. Tired of pretending I didn't notice the way she made everything about her. Tired of carrying the weight of being the outsider in my own family. Stephen stepped outside to return a work call before the ceremony began. I stood slowly to stretch. That's when I heard it. "Natalie," I turned. There she was. Emily stood alone now. Her eyes flicked to my stomach, then to my dress. She smirked, not kindly. "You're really showing, huh?" "I'm 9 months," I replied evenly. "He's healthy." She nodded slowly, then eyed me head to toe. "You couldn't find something more flattering." The air around us felt colder. I bit the inside of my cheek and looked away. "Emily, I'm not here for drama. I came because despite everything, you're still my sister." That flickered something in her expression. Maybe guilt, or maybe annoyance. Then her voice dropped. "Then prove it." She pointed at a tall floral centerpiece, a heavy marble vase, placed near the main aisle. "It's blocking the photographer's angle. Move it to the front." I blinked. "You want me to carry that? It's not that heavy. I mean, unless pregnancy has made you useless." The words hit harder than I expected, but her tone, the cruelty in her delivery, hit even harder. "Emily," I said quietly, "I shouldn't lift anything." "You know that?" She took a step closer, leaned in, and hissed through clenched teeth, "Then why are you even here?" That was it. The mask was off. I turned, ready to walk away. I would not let her bait me. Not today, but before I could take my second step. She shoved me. The push wasn't gentle, it wasn't playful, it was intentional. Calculated, just enough force to send my swollen body off balance, but not enough for anyone to call it violence at first glance. Except I was 37 weeks pregnant, and I fell hard. My knees struck the marble floor with a sickening crack. Pain exploded through my hips and lower back. Before I could even cry out, I felt it warmth spreading down my thighs, soaking through my dress. My water had broken. A hush fell over the ballroom. Gasps, chairs scraped back. A glass dropped, then silence. My hands pressed into the floor as I tried to lift myself. The soaked fabric clung to my legs, heavy and humiliating. I looked up and saw her. Emily stepped back, her eyes wide. Shock, guilt, fear. No, not fear of what she had done. Fear of what it would look like. And then, as if on cue, my mother appeared. Heels clicking like gunshots on the floor, she stormed toward me, crouched low, not to help but to hiss through gritted teeth. "Get up, don't make a scene. You've embarrassed us enough." I stared at her, dazed, bleeding, shaking, and she still saw me as the problem. Before I could respond, another figure stormed through the crowd. My father, Frank Bennett, the man who never raised his voice, but carried authority like a badge, now charged through the guests like a man possessed. His face was flushed, his eyes burning with something between rage and shame. He didn't ask if I was okay. He didn't reach to help me up. He reached for a tripod. It had been left nearby by one of the photographers. He grabbed it with both hands, folded it in midair, and swung straight at me. The sound it made when it struck my skull was something I'll never forget. A dull metallic crack that echoed through the ballroom like a gunshot. And then, nothing. No sound, no breath, just stillness. My ears rang, my vision blurred, my face tilted sideways, and all I could see was a puddle of water and blood beneath me. I couldn't move, couldn't cry, couldn't even scream. Someone finally did. A woman's voice shouted, "He hit her. He just hit her." Chairs screeched back. Guests gasped, pulled out phones, backed away like I was something contagious. And through it all, Emily screamed again. "You just had to ruin my day. This was supposed to be about me." That was her concern, not my head, not the baby, not my pain, but her perfect day. I saw her makeup beginning to smear her fingers, clutching her dress in a panic, not for what had happened, but for the photos, the footage, the reputation. And then came the voice that cut through the madness like thunder. "Natalie, Stephen." He pushed past stunned guests and dropped to his knees beside me, eyes wide in horror. "Oh my God, who did this to you?" he whispered. His hands hovered, trembling, not knowing where to touch. First my face, my belly, my hair, now slick with blood. "I'm calling 911, he growled, yanking his phone from his pocket. "This is an emergency," he shouted. "My wife's water just broke. She's been assaulted, she's bleeding, and she's 9 months pregnant." His voice didn't shake. It roared. Guests who had frozen in place finally moved, some stepping forward with jackets, napkins, anything to help. And in the background, I could still hear them. Emily wailing about her ruined day. My father standing in a corner mumbling something incoherent. My mother trying to quiet everyone like this could still be managed, but it couldn't. Because in that moment, everything broke. Not just my water, not just my skin, but the illusion. The belief that maybe, just maybe, they still loved me in some twisted, dysfunctional way. They didn't. They saw me as an inconvenience, and as the sirens echoed closer, as Stephen held my face and whispered, "I'm here. I'm here," I finally realized I was done. The ambulance doors slammed shut, drowning out the chaos behind us. Inside, it was still too still. The paramedic checked my pulse, then the fetal monitor. Another pressed gauze gently to my temple where the tripod had hit. Stephen sat beside me, his hand wrapped around mine, his voice shaking but steady. "You're doing great," he whispered. "He's okay. You're okay?" I wasn't sure I believed him. But I needed to. The sirens screamed above us as we sped through Portland's narrow streets toward St. Grace Hospital. I kept my eyes on the ceiling of the ambulance, focusing on the rhythm of the flashing lights reflecting off the walls. My head throbbed, my belly cramped. My dress was soaked through, but something else had started burning inside me. Resolve. This wasn't just about labor anymore. This was about everything they'd done for 31 years. By the time we reached the ER bay, a maternity team was waiting. Dr. Lisa Bennett, my OB, thank God, was there in full scrubs. She held my hand as they wheeled me in. "You're safe now," she said. "We're going to take care of you and the baby." Stephen stayed by my side the entire time. Through the monitors, the IVs, the intake questions, and then came the contractions. Fast, hard, unrelenting. The trauma had triggered active labor. The hours that followed blurred together in a swirl of pain and breath and pushing and holding on. And then at 2:03 a.m., my son Leo entered the world. His first cry shattered the silence, a strong, healthy scream. A declaration I sobbed, not just from exhaustion but from something deeper. A release, a kind of rebirth I hadn't expected. "Hi, sweetheart," I whispered, holding him against my chest. "Welcome to a better world." Stephen kissed my forehead. Then Leo's, "You did it," he said, eyes full of awe. "You did everything." We stayed in the hospital for 4 days. Enough time to recover from the concussion, from the trauma, from the emotional rupture that felt like a lifetime condensed into one night. The nurses were kind. No one whispered, no one judged. They treated me like a person. Not a scandal, not a mess, just a mother. But as I held Leo close during those quiet nights, something hardened in me. They had pushed me, humiliated me, hit me, but they would never silence me again. 2 days after I was discharged, Stephen and I, walked into the law offices of Mark Wilson. He didn't offer a tissue or a forced smile, just a calm presence, a notebook, and a promise to listen. I told him everything. Stephen filled in the rest. Mark had already seen the videos. There were at least 6 separate angles of what happened that night. Guess who had recorded from different corners of the room? Footage of Emily shoving me, of my water breaking, of my father grabbing the tripod and swinging, of my mother scolding me through clenched teeth as I bled on the floor. It was already viral. Over 2 million views across Instagram, TikTok, and Facebook. Hashtags were trending. Comment sections filled with outrage. Nurses, mothers, advocates, lawyers, all demanding justice. I don't just want to file a report, I said, Leo sleeping against my chest. I want to press every charge possible. Mark didn't hesitate. We'll file for aggravated assault, endangerment of an unborn child, public battery, and emotional abuse, he said, scribbling fast. The evidence is overwhelming. He wasn't wrong. By the end of the week, subpoenas were issued. Witnesses lined up. Emily, Frank, Helen, all served. That's when the silence began. No texts, no voicemails, no apologies. Not that I expected any. I didn't want regret. I wanted accountability. Over the next few weeks, we prepared depositions, affidavits, expert medical opinions. I showed up to every appointment, every court meeting with Leo in my arms and my head held high. People stared, whispered, but I wasn't hiding anymore. What they did was criminal, and for the first time in my life, I wasn't afraid to make it known. The courtroom was packed. Reporters lined the back wall. Advocates and strangers who had followed the case online filled the benches. But I didn't look at them. I kept my eyes forward on the judge, on the jury, on the truth. Stephen sat beside me, Leo asleep in a soft carrier strapped to his chest. The same child they tried to erase from that wedding was now the reason I sat, tall shoulders back, unshaken. My mother arrived in a beige pantsuit, still trying to look composed, like she could outdress the consequences. My father wore a wrinkled gray jacket, staring at the floor, his hands clenched, and Emily looked like a shattered version of her former self. Hair undone, face pale, her designer heels clicking on the courthouse tile, with no music to match them anymore. The prosecution didn't have to work hard. They began with the footage, angle after angle, the push, the fall, the gush of fluid, the blow to the head, the blood. My mother's hissed whisper, Stephen's cries for help, the sirens, the screams. Everything. The courtroom stayed silent. You could hear people breathing, you could hear chairs creak as they leaned forward, stunned. The DA looked the jury in the eye and said, "This was not a misunderstanding. This was assault. This was humiliation. This was a betrayal of the most sacred human bond, family." Then came the witnesses. 3 guests testified that Emily pushed me with clear intent. One server recalled hearing my mother whisper, "Don't make a scene," as I bled on the ground. A photographer told the jury that my father looked possessed when he lifted the tripod, and a paramedic testified about my condition upon arrival. Mild head trauma, unstable contractions, extreme emotional distress. Then came the defense. My mother claimed I was unstable and had a history of overreacting. My father said he didn't mean to hit me, that he was trying to move the tripod, and panicked. Emily sobbed about how stressful wedding planning had been. "It was supposed to be my special day," she whispered. "She ruined it. She came to provoke me, but none of it held. Not with the videos, not with the witnesses, not with the truth burning through every frame of that footage. When it was my turn to speak, I stood, not to cry, not to beg, to testify. I was 9 months pregnant," I said, steady. "I had every right to be there. I had every right to be safe. I had every right to be treated like a human being." I turned toward the defendants. "You ignored my pregnancy. You shoved me. You humiliated me. You struck me while I was already down. And then you tried to make me feel like the problem." I took a breath. "But I'm not the problem anymore." And I sat down. The closing arguments were brief. The evidence spoke louder than any speech. The jury returned in less than 2 hours. The judge's voice was calm, measured, but his words shook the walls. "Barbara Bennett, Frank Bennett, and Emily Lively, this court finds you guilty on all counts." Gasps rippled through the room. "You are each sentenced to serve time in state custody," he continued, "with no eligibility for early parole. The court recognizes the physical, emotional, and psychological damage inflicted upon Natalie Bennett and her unborn child. Stephen gripped my hand. Leo shifted slightly against his chest. I exhaled for the first time in weeks. My mother stared forward, lips tight, refusing to cry. My father hung his head. Emily broke. She collapsed onto the defense table, wailing. "This isn't fair. I didn't mean to. This was supposed to be my life." But no one moved. No one comforted her. Not even the guards who handcuffed her wrists and led her from the room. And just like that, they were gone. 3 people who had held power over me for a lifetime. Silenced, judged, and stripped of their control in one final act of public reckoning. And I didn't feel revenge. I felt release. A year has passed today. Sunlight filters through the windows of our little house in Southeast Portland balloons. Bob above the dining table, a small blue and white cake sits waiting beneath a single flickering candle. And Leo, my son. My strength is toddling across the living room in a dinosaur onesie, giggling at the sound of his own steps. It's his first birthday, the anniversary of the most traumatic day of my life, and the beginning of something entirely new. Stephen is in the kitchen lighting the last candle. He catches my eye and smiles. That quiet kind of smile, the one that says, "We made it." I nod, blinking back tears. We sing softly. Not for show, not for guests. Just for us. "Happy birthday to you." Leo claps his little hands and smears frosting on his cheek. And I laugh. Not politely, not because I'm supposed to, but because I am truly deeply happy after the verdict. We didn't go back to the apartment. We moved into Stephen's childhood home, a cozy 2-story place with a wraparound porch and a garden that somehow always blooms even in the grayest months. His parents are long gone, but the house has memory, warmth. It waited for a family. We gave it one. I repainted Leo's nursery myself. Pale blue walls, painted stars on the ceiling, hand-drawn animal murals from sketches I used to dream of as a girl. Each brushstroke whispered the same promise. You are safe, you are wanted, you are free. I reopened my event planning business from home, not to prove anything, not to impress anyone, but because I love creating joy, because I deserve to dream again. And I stopped apologizing. I stopped shrinking myself to make other people comfortable. I stopped chasing validation from people incapable of giving it. And most importantly, I stopped staying silent. The family I came from is gone, and in its place, I've built a better one. The greatest revenge wasn't prison time. It was peace, because Leo will grow up never questioning his worth. He'll grow up surrounded by love, not manipulation, by honesty, not control. And me, I didn't just survive them, I outgrew them. What do you do when the people who raised you are the very ones who left you bleeding? You stop begging to be seen, you stop shrinking to fit into spaces that were never built for you, and you start reclaiming your voice. The day I went into labor on that marble floor wasn't just the day I became a mother, it was the day I stopped apologizing for surviving. If you've ever felt like the outcast in your own family, if you've ever been blamed for the very wounds they gave you, then you understand the story isn't just mine. It belongs to anyone who dared to walk away and didn't look back. So let me ask you, have you ever had to cut ties to protect your peace? Share your story in the comments. If you believe Natalie deserved better, type R justice for Natalie. If you've walked away from a toxic family dynamic, type I choose peace. And if you never want to miss another powerful true story like this, subscribe now to EN Reddit Story, because here every story has a voice, and every voice deserves to be heard.